Drilling is now underway at Vizsla Copper's primary focus, its Palmer project in southeast Alaska. Vizsla announced near the start of the year it was acquiring the property. In April, Vizsla committed $13.7 million US to its 2026 exploration program. The company will be diamond drilling about 10,000 meters of Palmer, as well as expanded technical studies and geophysics. The company also has drills turning in projects throughout BC. 4 rigs in total, which will be generating lots of news, says the CEO, Craig Parry. Craig, welcome to Mining Stock Daily.
Hey, Michael, great to be with you at this very exciting time.
Craig, let's start with your primary focus, Palmer. In your June 18th news release, you say that the program balances resource expansion and discovery.
Yeah, before we get into that, Michael, I've got to say to you, for you and Trevor Hall, both good mates, that you're doing a fabulous job. And since you've been on Spotify, you've become compulsory listening for my family when we go on road trips. So thank you for that. You've done very well. Yeah, look, I've been waiting for this moment for probably 20 years where I've got a very high grade copper deposit that we're drilling out. Of course, the Palmer project's a polymetallic, volcanogenic, massive sulfide deposit. We've got a lot of zinc, barite, precious metals in there as well, but copper's where it's at. And I can tell you, we've just set up those, we've got 2 rigs there now. One of those rigs is set up to infill and expand the high-grade copper zone, which was found in 2023. Some of the best results that came out of that drill program, and that was really, that zone was only discovered then, included 44 meters at 6.5% copper and 8.2% copper equivalent, 37 meters at 8.4% copper equivalent, and 24 meters at 11.15% copper equivalent. So we're drilling in and around those. That zone has not been closed off by drilling, so we're looking to extend that. I think, we were so excited to buy this project back in December last year for those incredibly high grade and thick intercepts of copper. And finally, we're testing those. And, we point to people, the comparable companies out there. Of course, Foran recently taken out for $3.2 billion. They're about 4 years down the road from us. My friend Steve Parsons, Firefly, ASX-listed Firefly, their Ming project in Newfoundland, they've been drilling out high-grade copper hits there as well. Some of these have been very sort of high-tenor hits like we've got at the Palmer project. That's now a $2 billion company. Here we are, we're sitting here with a $100 million market capitalisation, just launched what will be the most important program in the company's history in and around those high-grade zones. So I think, hopefully off the back of this, should we get good results, you can never guarantee them, but geez, we're drilling a known deposit with some incredibly high-grade hits. You would think that at some point over this summer, as we start to deliver those results, that we'll have a major re-rate here. So we're excited to hit the ground there. And of course, over at our other projects in British Columbia, we've been drilling away assiduously for the past 4 months now. And more results coming out of that program as well. So it's an exciting time. 4 rigs turning, very strong news flow going into the second half of the year, and very excited, particularly by what we're seeing at Palmer there.
How flexible can you be? It is a bit of a narrow window up there in terms of drilling at Palmer because it is in southeastern Alaska. So as you get drill results coming in, how do you expect to act on that news?
Yeah, so that's right. It is a fairly narrow window. I guess one of the advantages of being at that sort of latitude that's a little bit south of Whitehorse, is that you get sunlight for about 23 hours a day this time of the year. So our drill rates so far have been very productive. I think, if you look at the core on our website from that high-grade copper zone, it's very obvious when you hit high-grade mineralisation. And I would doubt that we'd be able to keep a lid on that. I think as that core comes out of the ground, we'll be obliged to demonstrate it to the market, show what we're drilling, because it would be market sensitive should we hit those big, thick strings of, sphalerite, chalcopyrite, pyrrhotite, pentlandite type mineralisation here. sorry, not pentlandite, I should say pyrrhotite, but, very, very strongly, strong alteration and very clear, intense, massive copper sulfide mineralisation. So, it'd be hard to sit on that. So should we hit that, I think in the next couple of weeks, we'll be putting out a news release that we've intersected that type of mineralisation. And then, I would expect that it'll be 4 to 6 weeks before we get assays back for those zones. So, a little bit like the uranium business, as some of your listeners will be aware, I've had quite a bit of experience in the uranium sector, having built NextGen and then ISO Energy with my partners there. The great thing about uranium exploration is you put out your scintillometer results, and then a few weeks later you get your assay results back. So you get a double sort of kick of the can in the way from those drill holes. And here I think, we'd love to think that we'll intersect some of this beautiful massive sulfide in mineralisation that we've seen in these drill holes, particularly from that high-grade copper zone, but also across the property. And so, you're obliged to put out, I think, visuals of that core as it comes out of the ground should it hit mineralisation. So it's an exciting time, lots of news flow coming up. We are also there at Palmer testing other targets and looking to expand some of those other recent high-grade zones, the high-grade zones that have been discovered over the last 5 or 6 years in that area. So we've got a lot of drilling to do, a lot of targets to test, a lot of mineralisation to follow up. It's a proverbial dripping roast, Michael, up there in Palmer. We're excited about the program.
You had a mineral resource estimate from Palmer for January 2025. Are you looking ahead to another MRE?
We are. We're looking, one of the things that previous explorers hadn't done was factor in a large barite resource that exists there. And of course, barite has great value, particularly to the US at the moment, as oil and gas drilling ramps up massively again. So we'll be looking at incorporating the barite into the resource base as well. At the moment, it sits at, M&I together, indicated and inferred together is nearly 18 million tonnes at about 3.2% copper equivalent. We'll be looking to incorporate that barite in, and then this program, will effectively allow us to upgrade that resource. And I suppose what we're looking for, we think that for a project like this to be of a scale enough to make it economic, we probably need 25 to 30 million tonnes of that sort of material at the grade that we're seeing there. So we're not far away from that, Michael. I'd like to think that this program will get us a long way down the track to having a project that has critical mass that we can wade back into, dust off the PEA that was done in 2019, really advance that very quickly through that study phase next year, and start looking at the economics of the project at that point in time. But suffice to say, in a market like this, having that much 3+% material near surface in a great location, 40 kilometres from tidewater on the major highway that runs up to the Yukon, it's a fabulous project, fabulous location, and very excited to see what this program holds for us. But I think a good strong chance of getting the project to a size that has that critical mass that we'll want to move forward into studies.
Now, the primary work right now is understanding and continuing to do the geological modeling for what's happening at Palmer. Can you talk about any of the other tracks that you have underway for Palmer in terms of advancing it? Now, obviously, the main work that you're going to be doing at Palmer is understanding the geology and continue to model it out more, Craig. But can you talk about other tracks that you have going on at Palmer right now to advance the project?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I've got to give a big shout out to Pete Mercer and his team, particularly Nicole Dean, who leads our program up there in Haynes and in Palmer. They've done a fabulous job of getting on the ground safely and start commencing our drill program. We're getting very good government engagement. Peter was down in Washington a couple of weeks ago, met with all of the key Alaskan senators, Dan Crenshaw, Lisa Murkowski. We understand Lisa Murkowski has a chance of being the chair of one of the key committees there in Washington come November. the Appropriations Committee. So that's very useful to us. And in fact, I'm heading up to Alaska on Monday, partly because I want to take the road from Whitehorse down to the project. And of course, that main highway that runs down from Whitehorse to Haines runs right past our mine gate. So we want to check that out. Go and check out the drilling. So that's one thing. But my main reason for heading up there is that Governor Dunleavy's requested a meeting with us. The Alaskan government's looking at expanding port infrastructure in the Alaskan Panhandle. They are looking at potential development of a new industrial port in Haines, Alaska, and that's something we're supporting with them and indeed partnering with them. We've helped fund some of the early work on that program. So we're going to sit down with Governor Dunleavy and his various secretaries, particularly Secretary for Transport and for Mining, people that we know very well. So we're getting, I must say, I'm astonished with the access we're getting from the government, particularly in Alaska. So and this will be the third time that I've met with Governor Dunleavy. So that's very, very positive. He's a big proponent of the project. Of course, if you go back to March last year with Trump's executive order on mineral development in Alaska, his response to that, of course, was that Palmer was the number one project on his list of projects to see advanced and developed in Alaska. So that's fantastic. We're a major employer in the Haines community, one of the largest employers during these campaigns. I think we've got probably 30 people on the ground there at the moment. And so we're really supporting the community. And I must say, we're doing things there. I spent 2 weeks in Haines back in March this year. It's a beautiful place, lovely place, wonderful people up there. A lot of the people I talk to are screaming out for jobs, for opportunity. We talk to a lot of younger people there as well. And, Haines is struggling for commercial opportunities, business opportunities. And so, people that would stay there, are heading off and heading back to the lower 48 or other parts of Alaska for jobs. We can help with that, I think. And so we're getting a good, strong hearing from the community there. There's certainly some naysayers, as there always is with projects anywhere around the world. But our project is incredibly well managed environmentally, and we'll continue to steward the project under the high standards that we set for ourselves and the government sets for ourselves. So we look forward to working constructively with the entire community in that region to advance this project. So I'm very, very happy to be operating in Alaska and in the US.
Quickly, but just remind us, how far is Haines from Palmer?
Haines is only 50 kilometres from Palmer. And the major highway there that runs from Haines up to Haines Junction and then across to Whitehorse in the Yukon runs literally 10 kilometres past the start of the from the gate from the project. So, it's an incredible location right next to Tidewater and an outstanding project, partly because of that, but mostly because of that very high-grade nature of the project.
Let's talk about your other projects, Craig. You folded in Palmer close to the beginning of the year. I believe the announcement was in late 2025. But you do have those other BC properties. And I think at the top of those ones would be your Thira discovery, which is about 10 kilometers south of the Poplar deposit. You said in another interview, there's porphyry alteration and, quote, something special is going on.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Of course, we bought Poplar for $2.3 million about two and a half years ago. We bought it for the existing Poplar deposit, but when we got on the ground, we were astonished by the southern half of the property, which is marked by a vast trail, 8 kilometre by 4 kilometre zone of QSP or quartz-sericite pyrite alteration, clearly coming off a porphyry system. We made that discovery of the Thira deposit. We've spent a good chunk of the first half of this year drilling Thira out and looking for the edges of it. I can say we haven't fully found that yet, but what surprised us is the scale of the system. At the moment, we've defined 500 metre by 800 metre zone only down to 500 metres so far. We haven't drilled really past that. And that's shaping up to be a very large mineralised porphyry system. So, we want to get, at the moment, we've moved those 2 rigs off. We're stepping back to take a look at what we've got at that Thira zone on Poplar. We've sent those 2 rigs down to Woodjam to test some of our better targets down there. That's almost done. We'll be waiting on assays for some time to come out of Woodjam, and then those rigs will move back to Thira and commence with a drill out of the Thira discovery of the porphyry itself. But Michael, as I mentioned there, the east-west, this zone of QSP alteration, which is obviously associated with porphyry systems, there's no way that Thira itself, by itself, can have caused such a massive trail of alteration. So we know there are other porphyry apophyses hiding in this system. We've tested one at Camp Lake and got some interesting results. We're waiting on assays there. I don't think we've figured that out yet. And then excitingly down at Copper Pond, we've tested that target. And again, we've seen some good alteration at Copper Pond. We're waiting on assays again. And then out to the east, there are other targets that we want to test. So we're getting those 2 rigs back from Woodjam up to Poplar and testing that big Thira anomaly is the objective for the next quarter on our BC projects. I think we're a very strong chance of making a discovery in such a large train of alteration. And of course, just up the road, our friends at Surge Copper, they've got a large resource base there, 2 billion tonnes at about 0.25, 0.3% copper. We know we're in territory that delivers very large porphyry systems, and I think we're starting to see that emerge at that Thira anomaly and from that Thira discovery. So we're very excited about that. It could be a very, very large system, and of course it's in a great location on the major road that runs down to the Huckleberry mine. There's grid power within 4 kilometres of this discovery we've made. It's rolling hills, undulating terrain, largely unwooded, so our access there is year-round. We've been drilling there since February, and perfect location to develop a project.
Let's head further south, and that would be your Copperview project near Merritt. You announced that you get your drilling permit in April.
Yeah, that's right. We did. We're very. Copperview's a funny one. Steve Blower, he was out there hunting. He likes to go hunting for deer out in that neck of the woods. And Steve, Steve's done a tremendous job. He's one of the best uranium explorers ever, having discovered a couple of deposits, including our ISO Energy's Hurricane deposit. But he's also, very, very good at copper exploration. And Steve was the mine geologist at the Huckleberry mine just south of us many years ago. He's done a great job of getting our permits and getting us on the ground here. And Copperview, he noticed copper staining on rocks in that neck of the woods, and we bought that project. It's only 4 kilometres north of Kodiak's Gate Zone on the same host structure. There's a very, very prominent IP anomaly there. It's one of our lower priorities, which sort of tells you a little bit of our portfolio, because it's obviously an extraordinary target. So, I'd love to see us get in there and test that the back end of the year. And, I think, again, we're a very good chance of making a discovery there. So we are drilling for tons and grade across all of our properties, but also drilling for discovery. And be very hopeful that we'll announce a discovery in the not too distant future at one or more of the projects.
Now, you've mentioned that you're seeing some delays with assays, and look, you've got a very active program with the 4 drill rigs that you're going to be going, and then also kind of you were looking forward again with Palmer, because you were going to be drilling behind that zone 1, which is looking very popular right now, or very promising, I should say, rather, right now, Craig. Any other color that you could offer on that? This, because the news flow is just going to be very crucial for what you're doing at Vizsla Copper.
Yeah, it is, and I think we'll be looking for labs with more capacity. I think I've just learned the other day that the one of the labs in Whitehorse has a bit more capacity than others. Our friends over there at Gladiator Resources, And a big shout out to them. They're doing some phenomenal things there. They've got a tremendous set of discoveries on their hands. They're getting quite quick turnaround on assays. So we've got to look at all of those things and try and change the game there. But I think, one of the issues for sure will be the fact that a lot of people are drilling. And Michael, that's, I talk to my friend Peter Brown pretty much every day, and he keeps emphasising the fact that he's never seen a market quite like this where there's such great access to capital. But moreover, he's never seen such good geology around the world. So, a lot of money's been raised for a lot of good projects, and there's a lot of drilling going on. So those assays will be an issue. But I encourage people to look at investing in assay labs at the moment. I've done that myself. But, for us, we'll be pushing. And if we do see anything, we will be paying the rush fee to get things assayed more quickly. And I think we're a good chance, particularly at Palmer, of drilling some things that are going to demand us get those numbers, get those assay numbers back quickly so that we can continue to analyse where we should drill next and have the full suite of data available to us to determine where we put the next set of holes.
Craig, could you talk about the asset mix at Vizsla Copper? So you did acquire Palmer near the start of the year, which you have noted is your, which I believe you're saying is your primary focus. You're really starting to sink your teeth into it now. I'm just wondering what the rest of the mix of assets are at Vizsla Copper. Is the market going to be able to adequately price all of the assets you have under, especially what's happening with Thira? I think in another presentation, you said something that it would be a year or two before you made any decisions.
It's a really, really good question. And it is an interesting mix. Of course, what we're trying to do here is build a mid-tier copper producer in record time. Very much easier said than done. Porphyry systems, of course, large systems. And if you look at Surge Copper's feasibility study or pre-feasibility study, on their Berg and Berget deposits they've just put out, they're talking about a $4 billion capital budget for the development of that project. So these things, they're large, long life, moderate grade systems, perhaps not the best types of projects for a junior to look at development. Palmer, on the other hand, very much in our wheelhouse. If you look at what we're doing at Vizsla Silver, at Skeena, we're building major mining projects that are, 200 million up to about $700 million capital type budgets. We've demonstrated that we can do that, raise that sort of capital and advance those projects into development and production. That's what we want to do here. And I think if you look at the PEA from the Palmer project back in 2019, now that was done at a time when they didn't have the benefit of that very high grade copper zone, but it had good economics. I think they're looking at about a $300 to $400 million capital budget. That's something that's very much manageable for ourselves. We can build those sorts of projects ourselves, and indeed under Simon Smirlek at Inventor Capital, Simon, probably the most prolific and world's best mine builder, a bit of an unsung hero, my best mate and partner in Inventor Capital and our chief operating officer at Vizsla Silver. That's a scale of project that we can build, take into production ourselves. So that sets us in good stead. At some point in the cycle in the next few years, particularly as copper roars through $20 per pound at the back end of this decade, those porphyry copper projects that we've got on the books will have a huge amount of value to the market, particularly Thira, which is showing that it has the scale to potentially be a 1 billion ton plus resource. It's so may not be the project for us over the longer term. Certainly, we've had good, strong interest from a number of the majors in looking at that project, and we may look to capture value for our shareholders from those projects, either through a sale or through an earn-in type agreement with someone else at a later date. But we don't need to make any decisions at the moment. We're well funded. We've got $28 million in the bank at the moment. That sees us well into the first quarter of next year at the rate we're drilling at the moment. So we're in good shape, and we can make decisions at some point in the next couple of years as this cycle evolves.
Lastly, Craig, I just want to ask you about markets, copper price and precious metal prices. Just before this conversation, you were talking about arrows. Looking back in time, what this particular market reminds you like. We did have the sell-off with the gold prices. It did dip below 4,000. I mean, that's still a terrific price for precious metal prices. We obviously have the geopolitical instability, and then also we've seen the tech wobbles as well too.
Yeah, we're all sort of crying in our beer that gold's back at 4,000, copper's at $6, and silver's dropped back to high 50s. I think things never go up linearly. You always need something of a correction and a base. A resetting of a base. I think we're not far away from that. If you look at what happened sort of during the GFC, which was the last really big washout of the nature that perhaps is coming up here, it feels very much to me like we're around 2007. You've got this big macro situation, investors making a huge amount of money out of AI investment, cryptocurrency and the like, and that looks like it's correcting. I do think that, we're probably overdue a broader market washout, a broader market crash. And this feels very much like 2007 to me. There were points where the gold price dropped significantly. 2008, of course, during the GFC, we saw the gold price go from about 1,400 an ounce back to 600 an ounce. It flushed out a lot of investors. And then, 12, 18 months later, gold was back at sort of $1,700 an ounce. So I'd encourage people not to get too carried away with what they're seeing at the moment. This is a natural retracement, natural pullback. The fundamentals haven't changed. You perhaps everyone will be hanging, really looking careful at what Warsh and the new chair of the Fed is saying. Some of his comments have been very hawkish. I think that they're being misinterpreted. I don't think that the US is going to raise interest rates anytime soon. So this is very good for gold. So there's the level of misinterpretation across the investment sector into the precious metal space. I think that will it will become apparent that Warsh isn't hawkish over the coming months, and perhaps he's just saying that. We've seen that from central bankers before, somewhat misguiding the market to reach their ends. Particularly in Australia, we've seen Reserve Bank governors there do that over the years. So I think that's what's happening. I think that people are misinterpreting that. I think that nothing's changed on the gold front. And then if you go to silver, of course, and at Vizsla Silver, we're waiting on our permit so that we can build one of the world's best and largest high-margin silver mines there in Mexico. We are... Silver hasn't changed. The fundamental supply-demand imbalance is phenomenal. So my view is that this is an incredible buying opportunity. And indeed, I've been waiting in the market personally, of course, apart from running this company, I run my family office, and we have been buying a lot of cheap stock here lately. And I think that and patience, the willingness to try and pick a bottom here, and patience will reward investors incredibly over the next couple of years. This is just a natural pullback, natural retracement. Nothing's changed. We're going to see much higher metal prices across the spectrum, and copper particularly, back at $6. People are upset at that. It wasn't too long ago that copper was $4. So at $6, it's the pullback in equities is way overdone. So it's a great buying opportunity, and we've been capitalizing on that ourselves.
Craig Parry, we look forward to the assays, and we also look forward, the Mining Stock Daily crew looks forward to joining the Parry family on their road trips.
Thank you, Michael. I've got to say, and again, well done to you and Trevor for the fantastic work you do. I think it's really important, and you do such a great job. So thank you very much.
The information presented should not be considered investment advice. Mining Stock Daily and its affiliates are not responsible for any loss arising from any investment decision in connection with the material presented herein. Please do your own research or speak with a licensed financial representative before making any investment decisions.